Now, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Las Vegas, which is hosting the 2010 Netroots Nation. The conference opens today at the Rio Hotel and Casino. Thousands of people are attending, including a number of Democrats in Congress, policy speakers, progressive bloggers, and more. Among them is urban environmentalist Majora Carter. Newsweek's named her one of 25 to watch and one of the century's most important environmentalists. She's currently president of the green-collar economic consulting firm, the Majora Carter Group. In 2006, Majora Carter gave a rousing address at TED Talks. She talks about her life and her work. This is Majora Carter.
If you're here today, and I'm very happy that you are, you've all heard about how sustainable development will save us from ourselves. However, when we're not at TED, we are often told that a real sustainability policy agenda is just not feasible, especially in large urban areas like New York City. And that's because most people with decision-making powers in both the public and the private sector really don't feel as though they're in danger. The reason why I'm here today, in part, is because of a dog. An abandoned puppy I found back in the rain back in 1998. She turned out to be a much bigger dog than I'd anticipated. When she came into my life, we were fighting against a huge waste facility that planned for the East River waterfront. Despite the fact that our small part of New York City was already handled more than 40% of the entire city's commercial waste, a sewage treatment pelletizing plant, a sewage sludge plant, 4 power plants, the world's largest food distribution center, as well as other industries that bring more than 60,000 diesel truck trips to the area each week. The area also has one of the lowest ratios of parks to people in the city. So when I was contacted by the Parks Department about a $10,000 seed grant initiative to help develop waterfront projects, I thought they were really well-meaning but a bit naive. I'd lived in this area all my life and knew you could not get to the river because of all the lovely facilities that I'd mentioned earlier. Then while jogging with my dog one morning, she pulled me into what I thought was just another illegal dump. There were weeds and piles of garbage and other stuff that I won't mention here, but she kept dragging me, and lo and behold, at the end of that lot was the river. I knew that this forgotten little street end, abandoned like the dog that brought me there, was worth saving. And I knew it would grow to become the proud beginnings of the community-led revitalization of the new South Bronx. And just like my new dog, it was an idea that got bigger than I'd imagined. We garnered much support along the way, and the Hunts Point Riverside Park became the first waterfront park that the South Bronx had had in more than 60 years. We leveraged that $10,000 seed grant more than 300 times into a $3 million park. And in the fall, I'm actually going to exchange marriage vows with my beloved. Thank you very much. That's him pressing my buttons back there, which he does all the time. But those of us living in environmental justice communities are the canary in the coal mine. We feel the problems right now and have for some time. Environmental justice, for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, goes something like this. No community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less environmental benefits than any other. Unfortunately, race and class are extremely reliable indicators as to where one might find the good stuff, like parks and trees, and where one might find the bad stuff, like power plants and waste facilities. As a black person in America, I am twice as likely as a white person to live in an area where air pollution poses the greatest risk to my health. I am 5 times more likely to live within walking distance of a power plant or a chemical facility, which I do. These land use decisions created the hostile conditions that lead to problems like obesity, diabetes, and asthma. Why would someone leave their home to go for a brisk walk in a toxic neighborhood? Our 27% obesity rate is high even for this country, and diabetes comes with it. 1 out of 4 South Bronx children has asthma. Our asthma hospitalization rate is 7 times higher than the national average. These impacts are coming everyone's way, and we all pay dearly for solid waste costs, health problems associated with pollution, and more odiously, the cost of imprisoning our young black and Latino men who possess untold amounts of untapped potential. 50% of our residents live at or below the poverty line. 25% of us are unemployed. Low-income citizens often use emergency room visits as primary care. This comes at a high cost to taxpayers and produces no proportional benefits. Poor people are not only still poor, they are still unhealthy. Fortunately, there are many people like me who are striving for solutions that won't compromise the lives of low-income communities of color in the short term and won't destroy us all in the long term. None of us want that, and we all have that in common. So what else do we have in common? Well, first of all, we're all incredibly good looking. graduated high school, college, postgraduate degrees, traveled to interesting places, didn't have kids in your early teens, financially stable, never been imprisoned. Okay, good. But besides being a black woman, I am different from most of you in some other ways. I watched nearly half of the buildings in my neighborhood burn down. My big brother Lenny fought in Vietnam only to be gunned down a few blocks from our home. Jesus, I grew up with a crack house across the street. Yeah, I'm a poor black child from the ghetto. These things make me different from you, but the things we have in common set me apart from most of the people in my community, and I'm in between these two worlds with enough of my heart to fight for justice in the other. So how did things get so different for us? In the late 40s, my dad, a Pullman porter, son of a slave, bought a house in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx, and a few years later he married my mom. At the time, the community was a mostly white, working-class neighborhood. My dad was not alone, and as others liked him pursued their own version of the American dream, white flight became common in the South Bronx and in many cities around the country. Redlining was used by banks wherein certain sections of the city, including ours, were deemed off limits to any sort of investment. Many landlords believed it was more profitable to torch their buildings and collect insurance money rather than to sell under those conditions, dead or injured former tenants notwithstanding. Hunts Point was formerly a walk-to-work community, but now residents had neither work nor home to walk to. A national highway construction boom was added to our problems. In New York State, Robert Moses spearheaded an aggressive highway expansion campaign. One of its primary goals was to make it easier for residents of wealthy communities in Westchester County to go to Manhattan. The South Bronx, which lies in between, did not stand a chance. Residents were often given less than a month's notice before their buildings were razed. 600,000 people were displaced. The common perception was that only pimps and pushers and prostitutes were from the South Bronx. And if you are told from your earliest days that nothing good is going to come from your community, that is bad and ugly, how could it not reflect on you? So now, my family's property was worthless, save for that it was our home and all we had. And luckily for me, that home and the love inside of it, along with help from teachers, mentors, and friends along the way, was enough. Now, why is this story important? Because from a planning perspective, economic degradation begets environmental degradation, which begets social degradation. The disinvestment that began in the 1960s set the stage for all the environmental injustices that were to come. Antiquated zoning and land use regulations are still used to this day to continue putting polluting facilities in my neighborhood. Are these factors taken into consideration when land use policy is decided? What costs are associated with these decisions? And who pays? Who profits? Does anything justify what the local community goes through? This was planning, in quotes, that did not have our best interests in mind. Once we realized that, we decided it was time to do our own planning. That small park I told you about earlier was the first stage of building a greenway movement in the South Bronx. I wrote a $1.25 million federal transportation grant to design the plan for a waterfront esplanade with dedicated on-street bike paths. Physical improvements help inform public policy regarding traffic safety, the placement of waste in other facilities, which if done properly don't compromise the community's quality of life. They provide opportunities to be more physically active, as well as local economic development. Think bike shops, juice stands. We secured $20 million to build first phase projects. This is Lafayette Avenue. And that's redesigned by Matthews Nielsen Landscape Architects. And once this path is constructed, it'll connect the South Bronx with more than 400 acres of Randall's Island Park. Right now, we're separated by about 25 feet of water, but this link will change that. And as we nurture the natural environment, its abundance will give us back even more. We run a project called the Bronx Ecological Stewardship Training, which provides job training in the fields of ecological restoration so that folks from our community have the skills to compete for these well-paying jobs. Little by little, we're seeding the area with green-collar jobs that has both the people that have both a financial and personal stake in their environment. The Sheridan Expressway is an underutilized relic of the Robert Moses era, built with no regard for the neighborhoods that were divided by it. Even during rush hour, it goes virtually unused. The community created an alternative transportation plan that allows for the removal of the highway. We have the opportunity now to bring together all the stakeholders to re-envision how this 28 acres can be better utilized for parkland, affordable housing, and local economic development. We also built the New York City's first green and cool roof demonstration project on top of our offices. Cool roofs are highly reflective surfaces that don't absorb solar heat and pass it on to the building or atmosphere. Green roofs are soil and living plants. Both can be used instead of petroleum-based roofing materials that absorb heat, contribute to urban heat island effect, and degrade under the sun, which we in turn breathe. Green roofs also retain up to 75% of rainfall, so they reduce the city's need to fund costly end-of-pipe solutions, which incidentally are often located in environmental justice communities like mine. And they provide habitats for our little friends. So, so cool. Anyway, the demonstration project is a springboard for our own green roof installation business, bringing jobs and sustainable economic